Hello, everybody. Welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Hope you're having a great day. We've got a fantastic show for you today. If you've got nutritional questions you'd like to get answered, start typing those in now. If you're new to the show, it's the name of the game. I get as many questions answered within the time as possible. If you missed my interview on Tuesday with Dr. Rosansky, I highly encourage you to go back and watch it. We discussed Graves' disease in detail. He actually had Graves' disease and cured his own Graves' disease naturally. So if you struggle with Graves and you're looking for some hope and some potentially alternative answers than just destroying your thyroid or medicating it, it's definitely an interview you want to check out. We'll put a link in the show note below. We also talked about Hashimoto's and some of the consequences and side effects. We talked about, natural dietary changes that are helpful. We talked about how to reduce antibodies and so much more. So highly encourage you to check out that interview, and then I'll do my best to take thyroid-based questions today. And if you haven't watched my thyroid crash course on nutrition, it is a strong recommendation, especially any of you that are still struggling and trying to overcome a problem. There are many, many nutrients, vitamins, and minerals that are regulated, that regulate thyroid hormone production, also regulate how your thyroid hormone interacts with cells and with the DNA so that it works properly. And if your doctor who's diagnosed you with a thyroid problem hasn't looked at vitamins and minerals, you want to watch this so that you can get armed with the right information to maximize your thyroid outcomes nutritionally. And as always, thank you for tuning in. This week, if you are looking to get your nutritional levels tested, many of you have been asking when the next sale is. Well, right now, today. So if you want to take advantage of this sale, we have on our micronutrient testing kit. It measures over 50 vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. If you use code PRE20, P-R-E-20, you'll get 20% off. This is our biggest sale of the year as far as discounts are concerned. So if you've been on the fence or waiting to get your vitamin and mineral levels checked, highly recommend you take advantage of this sale for our intracellular nutrition analysis test, or INA test. And we'll put a link below for you guys if you want to check that out or take advantage of that sale. Okay, on to your questions. Let's see. Mara says, hi, Dr. Osborne. I follow 100% grain-free gluten, no lactose or sugars. I train 4 times a week, take glutamine amino acid, eat all organic, but can't put weight on. 48 kilograms, fat is 16%, muscles 36.2%. Can you explain why? It's more detailed than that, but I mean, on the easy surface, Mara, I would probably just look at total caloric intake as a starting place. If you're training 4 times a week and you're not putting on weight, and I imagine you're trying to put on muscle weight, but you could correct me if I'm wrong. But you've got to, at the very least, know what your intake of total calories versus your output of energy are. If you know those two things, it can be very helpful in terms of trying to gain weight. And what a lot of people do is they're in caloric deficits, so they're not eating enough calories to support the total energy expenditure of their day, and you won't put weight on if you're in that mode. So if you really want to put on weight, you've got to eat more calories than you use. And it takes about 3,500 calories to equate to 1 pound. So all that being said, I would start there. There are other things that you can try to do. If you're just trying to lean body mass, I would consider supplementation with creatine. We have a product called Ultra Creatine, and creatine's been very well researched for decades. It's been in the what's called the ergogenic realm of bodybuilders. It's been one of the most tried and true and most effective supplements to enhance muscle mass and strength and also performance. So in my opinion, it's one of my favorite ergogenic aids to use if you're trying to gain muscle mass. So try those 2 things out and come back and let me know. Let's see here. My wife had 2 ultrasounds, 1 MRI. Results came back normal. Doctor still wants a mammogram. I can't contemplate why the doctor would still want a mammogram other than just its standard of care? If you're talking about your wife and her breast tissue and she's had ultrasounds and MRIs that were normal, in my opinion, of mammograms is not good. And it's very contradictory to, the kind of the mainstream toe the line. Every woman should get mammograms. Your wife's got to be able to make a decision she's comfortable with. At the end of the day, that's really what it boils down to. But it makes no sense to me to radiate the breast tissue for the sake of trying to find cancer where radiation can cause the same kind of cancer you're trying to find. It'd be different if your wife had severe breast pain or big lumps or, abnormalities or growths or skin discoloration or changes in her breast tissue. And so she was concerned and worried, and, the doctors needed to get a diagnostic look a little bit more in depth. But if your wife is otherwise healthy with supple breast tissue, with no nodules, growths, pain, or other abnormalities, then the doctor's just being, in my opinion, overly aggressive. And so, you have to weigh that in. She's got to weigh that in with the best decision that allows her to sleep the best at night. Both my knees get very swollen. Doctors want to do partial knee replacement. Any recommendations? I mean, rehab your knees first. Swelling, can have a lot of different causes. For many people, it's muscular weakness. For others, it's vitamin or mineral deficiencies or food sensitivities that are driving inflammation. So getting all those things looked at before just doing a knee replacement, once you do a knee replacement, you can't take it back. And so it would just generally depend on why the knees were swelling in the first place. But diet change got to come first in that regard, in my experience. Okay, Tammy says, as a naive 20-year-old, I took radioactive iodine. 30 years later, will I need to take Tirosint the rest of my life? Could I try ultrathyroid support instead, or natural things? If your thyroid's been obliterated, no, you need to probably stay on your medication because you don't have a gland to produce it. I mean, you could try some of the natural things, but there's, it would be bad form for me to recommend trying to do that without medical supervision. So if you were going to try using like a glandular product, you would ideally, you don't want to just stop your medicine. You'd want to work with your prescribing doctor and tell them what your plan is, and work on a titration so that you titrate that medicine down slowly over time while you're monitoring your thyroid numbers. And if they're dropping dramatically as you wean off that or try to wean off your medicine, then that's your cue that you don't have any active thyroid tissue left. So if you've had it radiated and it's permanently damaged, then medicine is in your future, and so you have to do your best in that regard. Have Hashimoto since I was 18. I'm 46 now. I've been on Synthroid for 28 years. Would like to try getting off of it, but concerned my thyroid is not going to work. Yeah, I mean, that's a great concern to have. I would say, with that length of time, your first step should be to work with a doctor who understands this process of Hashimoto's autoimmunity. There's some things you can do right now today that might help you toward that endeavor. One would be get a copy of No Grain, No Pain and start following the diet. That diet in and of itself has been shown to reduce thyroid antibodies for Hashimoto's patients. So it's very effective in that regard. I mean, we see cases where people's TPO is well over 1,000, come down to under 100 just with diet change alone. So there's a lot to be said that diet can improve thyroid hormone function. So that's an easy thing you can start doing today at little to no cost, right? Just food changes. The second would be to get your vitamin and mineral status checked. There's two core nutrients that we know can cause elevations in thyroid antibodies, and also to the contrary, if you supplement with them, we know they can actually help lower thyroid antibodies. One is selenium, and the other is inositol. So the combination of selenium and inositol can impact your antibody levels, which may make or break your success. Remember, if you have active autoimmunity and active autoimmune inflammation against your thyroid hormone, trying to wean off your medicine is going to be unsuccessful. So you've got to get that inflammatory piece, that autoimmune piece under control first. So that's really step one. I wouldn't make any attempts at reducing medicine until you've done those things first. But, your other option is just to get with a really good doctor who understands these things to do the right testing. Remember, with any autoimmune condition, this is true of Hashimoto's, it's also true of Graves', you've got to find out what your unique triggers are. What are the unique triggers for you? Those are categorically, what are the triggers? It's food, it's chemical exposures, it's nutritional deficiencies, and it's microbial imbalances. So those four are what we call the categorical biochemical triggers of autoimmunity. Now, there are other triggers too. Stress can be a major trigger, environmental, emotional stress. So don't overlook that one either. You go back and watch the interview I did with Dr. Ozansky. It's one of the things he talked about was the intense stress that he was going through before he developed Graves' disease. But we can't underemphasize the biochemical stressors that are easy for people to change. It's easy to change your diet. It's easy to change your nutrition. It's easy to remove chemicals from your exposure. And it's easy to identify microbial imbalances and address them. So those things are what you should be long-term focusing on working with by getting objective testing measurements so that you can get to a place where you're ready to then start reducing your medicine under careful medical supervision and guidance. And it's not something I would recommend that you just do alone. Suffering from vitamin A deficiency due to past Accutane use and have night blindness. I'm trying a lot of things to fix this serum retinol. Vitamin A keeps coming back low. You got to get your zinc levels checked. Zinc carries vitamin A. The other thing to just be aware of is serum levels of retinol are not super accurate. So, I mean, you could have low serum retinol and it might not be the best way to look at your vitamin A status. But zinc carries vitamin A through the bloodstream. It distributes it. And so without zinc, you can't there's a protein called retinol binding protein. And it's like the taxi cab for vitamin A to shuttle through the bloodstream to your eyes. So I would look at those things. And then I would also look at potentially others. So Accutane can do a lot, it can create a lot of problems, including gut barrier dysfunction problems. In my opinion, it's one of the more dangerous medications. I mean, it every year kills people. It's not a benign medication, but it's very commonly used for acne. All that being said, get a good solid nutritional workup done because there could be other nutrients that are playing a role in that regard. Would you say that thyroid problems in some way contribute to stiff neck and shoulder muscles as though it was referred in a sense? I wouldn't say in a way, I would say absolutely, Shalene. So if we look at, thyroid deficiencies cause muscular cramping, muscular spasm, and muscular atrophy. It's pretty well established. So if somebody has low thyroid for years and they're struggling with neck pain, headaches, tightness in their shoulders, knots that just won't go away, weakness that's persistent and not responsive to kind of traditional or typical exercise, absolutely. So, the thyroid it directly impacts how you can grow and build new muscle tissue. So you've got to get that looked at if that's something you're struggling with. Now, other things can cause stiff neck and shoulder as well. I mean, there are a number of nutritional deficiencies linked to tightness in muscles. Magnesium, probably one of the most recognized nutrients involved in muscle contraction, relaxation. Calcium can also be a problem. Phosphorus and potassium can be a problem for muscle contraction, relaxation. And then just generalized weakness. A lot of people have tightness because they have poor posture, muscular weakness that's developed over years of sedentary behavior. So those are some of the kind of the lower hanging fruit causations of that particular problem. Suggestions for goiter and hyperthyroid that is not autoimmune. Well, if you've got a goiter, well, I mean, I don't know how you have hyperthyroid without an autoimmune component, first of all, Christina, because hyperthyroid is autoimmune. It's where you're making antibodies, what are called thyroid stimulating immunoglobulin, TSI, it's a hormone, or it's an antibody that stimulates your thyroid hormone production to go high. So I would say if you have hyperthyroidism, you have an autoimmune condition. You just may not have been tested for the autoimmune aspect of it. So I'd get with your doctor about that component, because if you do have hyperthyroid, then all the things I've been saying and all the things I talked about in Tuesday's interview with Dr. Ozansky and all the things he talked about apply to you. But, you know, with goiter, you've got to get your iodine levels checked, your B2, your vitamin C. It's important to know that zinc and magnesium play a role in thyroid hormone, and deficiencies in any of these nutrients could contribute to enlargement of your thyroid gland in general. But if you have again, whether or not you have hyperthyroid in my mind is questionable but I have limited information. But the goiter piece, you got to look at nutrition, because if there isn't an autoimmune component, then the likelihood that your goiter is nutritionally oriented is 90+%. Do you address not having a thyroid? So you've had a total thyroidectomy at 15 years of age due to Graves' disease. Well, if you've had your thyroid removed, Elizabeth, you have to stay on medicine the rest of your life. You don't have the gland to produce the hormone, so the medicine is definitely going to be very preserving of your life and functionality. But what I do recommend, what we would do, like somebody came to me post surgically having a thyroid removed and they wanted nutritional support, the same thing would apply. We would do full nutritional workup. We would look at, you know, what are the nutrients involved in helping support their thyroid hormone, because they can't make it. You're taking it. That synthetic version of thyroid hormone still needs nutritional support. It's still reliant upon vitamins and minerals to access cell membranes, to get inside the cell, to talk to your DNA. Those are all nutrients required to help that hormone do that. And so if we were just trying to optimize someone's health, you know, you can't take the surgery back, but we can certainly support the nutrition around it and make sure that you have the best potential outcomes nutritionally possible. Let's see here. On a grain-free, dairy-free diet for 2 months and have seen no result for Morton neuroma, is this a nutrient deficiency, or should I continue the diet? Continue the diet, but Morton neuromas are not super responsive to just diet change alone. I mean, I would definitely get nutritional levels checked. Among other things, I would look at functionally the structure. If this is in your foot, commonly Morton neuromas are in the feet, sometimes behind the knee, but typically in the foot. I would look at the structure of the tissue around it and see if there's any structural abnormality, something that might be creating a compression that would contribute to the formation of neuroma. But it's not just diet change and vitamins, it can be structural. I keep getting tendonitis all over, neck, thigh, back, shoulder. Is that in correlation with Hashimoto's? It can last more than 6 months each time. Absolutely can be, Claire. I certainly have seen that be the case in many, many people. But you may also have, I mean, so like there's the thyroid itself that's malfunctioning because of the autoimmune process that won't properly communicate to your muscles about just general metabolic maintenance. And then there's also what we would call the confounding factors that could be causing your thyroid problem, but also causing your muscle problems, right? And so an example of that might be gluten. So gluten causing antibody elevations and active autoimmune thyroid disease, but gluten can also cause muscle damage, and it can come in waves. It doesn't have to be always on. It can come in waves, meaning as you eat, you get these kind of up and down wave-like triggers, you know, that can last for months. Sometimes they don't last quite as long as what you're describing, but that's also a possibility. Remember, gluten can cause muscular tendon inflammation, ligamentous inflammation, joint inflammation, muscular inflammation. It's an equal opportunity inflammatory destroyer of human body tissue. So if you're gluten sensitive and you haven't figured that part out yet, you might just consider following my book, No Grain, No Pain. You know, get the diet going and see how you start responding. And if that's not working, now you really want to look at testing, right? The objective triggers, biochemical triggers are food, chemicals, microbes, and nutritional deficiencies. So having testing done to work up for those things can become invaluable to help you navigate which direction to go. What are some non-gluten whole grains I can eat? There aren't any, Laura. There's no grains that are gluten-free. There's no such thing. Corn has zein, rice has orzanin, millet has panacetin. So they call them gluten-free, but technically they're not gluten-free grains. So there aren't any gluten-free grains that you can eat. There are other flour alternatives that you can try: coconut flour, cassava flour, chestnut flour, green banana flour, tapioca flour. So I mean, there's a lot of other options in the realm of flours that might help you, but there aren't any grains that are truly gluten-free. Can we post, I think I have an article on gluten-free flour or grain-free flour alternatives for Laura, so that she has a resource for that. Can we get glycine from beef gelatin? Yes. Is a dry skin rash on the neck and jawline normal with Hashimoto's, and what could it be an indication of? So rash on the jawline can mean many things. Ideally, Carol, I'd like to see the rash. I mean, in order to be able to kind of better identify what we're talking about. I know we can't do that in this medium, but rashes and Hashimoto's can be coexisting. It's not that one and the other are the same. It's that, again, can gluten cause a rash? Yes. Can gluten cause Hashimoto's? Yes. Could gluten be causing both your rash and your Hashimoto's? Yes. Could it be other things? Yes. But because you already have that diagnosis with a mysterious rash, that rash is nothing really more, honestly, than skin inflammation. So, you got to figure out what's driving the inflammation. Why do you develop nodules in your thyroid? Well, partly it can be many reasons, but one of the reasons is you can get the thyroid itself will become enlarged as a result of trying to keep up with demand. And if there's something like an iodine deficiency, you get that enlarged goiter because the thyroid's trying to produce but can't. It doesn't have the ingredient to do it. And other reasons would be that the inflammation process of autoimmunity can actually create nodular development in the tissue. What nutrients lower TPO? Selenium and Inositol have both been studied in human trial to lower TPO, thyroid antibodies. Tested for low salivary IgA. What kind of gut issues would this indicate? IgA can be low for many reasons. Zinc deficiency can cause low IgA. Vitamin C deficiency can cause it. Protein deficiency can cause it. Chronic infection in the gut could cause low salivary IgA. Chronic infection in the body, like Lyme or really any other type of bacterial or fungal infection. Gluten can cause low IgA. Mold exposure can cause low IgA. So there's a lot of things that could cause it. If you, it sounds like you've had many health issues. I think this is the same person that's talking about the knee surgery and the knee pain. Like, ideally, you need to get with a good doctor and get a good workup done, because you've got too many problems that are ongoing than what you deserve to have. Can B1 be normal in serum but functionally I'm deficient? Absolutely. Serum's probably one of the worst ways to test it. So yes, absolutely can be normal in the serum. The best way to know is get an INA test. INA is what we want to measure vitamin B1 with. There are other ways to measure vitamin B1, but one of the more specialized tests for it, it's a transketolase activity coefficient test. Most doctors have never heard of it. There's really only one lab in the US that does it. They do not serve direct to consumer. You have to have a doctor who knows that test and can order that test and who knows of that lab, and good luck with that. This is where INA becomes a much more valuable way to assess it. Indirectly, you could ask your doctor to order lactic acid and pyruvic acid or in your blood. And so, vitamin B1 is important for regulating the levels of those two acids. And so typically if those are high, it can indicate vitamin B1 problems or B1 deficiency, but it's an indirect test. And when comes to indirect testing, there's a little left to be desired with indirect testing. Does the INA test look at glycine levels? Yes, it does. Is there a combination product with selenium and inositol? Maybe. I mean, I have, if you go to Gluten-Free Society, we have just selenium called Ultra Selenium, and we have an inositol product called Ultra Inositol. Now, our multivitamin Ultra Nutrients contains both, but not in the doses required that have been shown in human trials to actually be effective. Have Hashimoto's, does menopause affect the autoimmune? And if so, how do I adjust the way I treat it? I am currently using Thyroid. I mean, menopause affects a lot of things. There's a hormone downshift in menopause, but it doesn't necessarily affect the way you're going to deal with Hashimoto's. The way you deal with Hashimoto's is you identify what your triggers are. Lilac, so I'm going to say this repetitively for the sake of sounding like a broken record. What are the 4 biochemical triggers of autoimmune disease to include Hashimoto's? Food, chemical exposures, nutritional deficiencies, and microbial imbalances. Categories. 4, get them measured. If you want to get to the root of why, everybody gets told they have Hashimoto's. So you go to the endocrinologist to find antibodies. You have Hashimoto's. Well, why do I have Hashimoto's? I don't know, doc. I don't know. We don't know. It's idiopathic. But here's some medicine for the rest of your life. Come back in 6 months and we'll monitor your levels. It's a pattern that really doesn't make sense. If you don't know what causes the illness, then how do you know how to treat it effectively for the rest of my life? And how do you know that those treatments aren't going to have untoward side effects that are potentially problematic for me? We already know from regular research that the proper dose of thyroid hormone in people, the adequate dose, the proper dose, can contribute to muscle loss and bone loss over a long period of time. That's been shown in human research. So why wouldn't we start asking about why the disease exists? And unfortunately, there's a lack of curiosity in medicine today, in my experience and in my opinion, especially as it comes to autoimmune disease. In my training in the VA hospital, when I went through rheumatology internship, this is how I really stumbled across all of this. It's not anything that I'm unique about, that I'm like specially more intelligent than anyone else. It's just that what I saw there didn't make sense. Why were we giving people really powerful drugs that could cause cancer and rip holes in their gut and cause all kinds of other problems for the rest of their life? And the outcomes were not really any better. The outcomes were, you could manage their pain, but in the management of their pain, you caused other problems and other diseases. I don't want to trade a disease for a disease. I want to know why the disease exists. And that was the conundrum I kept running into when I would butt heads with my attending docs. But the books, the research, it's very clear. We know the triggers of autoimmune disease, that like the researchers have outlined this for decades. And so I'm just probably one of the first doctors that's ever simplified it into 4 categories. Food, chemicals, microbes, and nutritional deficiencies are the predominant triggers for autoimmune disease outside of intense periods of stress. But those 4, you can't control intense periods of stress, but you can control your food, your chemical exposures, your nutritional outlook, and you can control microbial imbalances if you know that they're there and you need to measure them. And so those, should be your priority, not managing or allowing somebody to manage your disease for the rest of your life. So many of you, I know, are in that situation, and I know it can be frustrating to find somebody who will work with you in a different way. But the more you guys demand it, I think the better off this world will go in terms of doctors becoming more curious and becoming more inquisitive. We've started a movement in the last 25 years. Me and many of my colleagues have started what people today call the functional medicine as a term. Right? We started this movement decades ago, and it's becoming more popular, not because we keep saying it, it's becoming more popular because the people that are applying it and working through the concept of functional medicine are getting better. And as they get better, they share their story. And as they share their story, other people are looking for the same kind of care. So the more we can spread that, that's why our mission is to save 100 million lives. It's to make sure the people struggling with autoimmune disease can get access to functional care where they can get root cause approaches to their care instead of drug management of their symptoms. Okay, are thyroid diseases genetic or run in family as a common issue? No. There may be some genetic predisposition. As an example, gluten sensitivity is genetic. It's genetic predisposition, and gluten can cause thyroid disease. So in that regard, yes, can potentially be genetic, but not everybody reacts to gluten in the same way. Thyroid diseases think of it as a minor genetic predisposition component, but the vast majority of it is environmental exposures or choices. And if you can narrow down what those things are and address them, then the genetic piece doesn't really matter. How can people have both Hashi and hypo? Hashi and hypo are the same thing. Hashimoto's is an autoimmune inflammatory disease of the thyroid that causes low thyroid hormone function. So when a doctor says you have Hashimoto's, by default, you have hypothyroidism. And also by default, you have an autoimmune condition. When a doctor says you have hypothyroidism, but you don't have Hashis, meaning you don't have the autoimmune component, you just have hypothyroidism, generally, in my experience, when somebody's diagnosed in that way, it's typically either because their antibody tests are showing up falsely negative because their immune systems are suppressed, or they have hypothyroidism because they're malnourished. They have vitamin deficiency, mineral deficiency, iodine deficiency is a common cause of hypothyroidism. Selenium deficiency is a cause of hypothyroidism. So that's why those things have to be looked at. But Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism are within the same kind of context. Hashi's is hypothyroidism, but not all hypothyroidism is Hashi. So you can have nutritionally low thyroid, or you can have an autoimmune low thyroid. So think of it in those terms. Is there a correlation between Hashimoto's onset after gallbladder removal? Possibly because of the surgery. There's the stress of the surgery. Surgery is scheduled trauma, right? So you're basically creating a trauma to the body that is the body's going to look at as a major stressing event. And so as a potential trigger, yes, any form of surgery or physical trauma can be a contributory factor in the development of autoimmune disease, including Hashi's. My thyroid was removed. It was diseased, but no cancer in 2001. What would you recommend me to use holistically in lieu of levothyroxine? If your whole gland was removed, you're not going to come off of medicine in that way. You're going to have to be on medication. But what you may find is that Armour Thyroid or Tirosint are better options for you than levothyroxine. Talk with your prescribing doctor. There are different medication options. Some people do much better on the natural desiccated options of medicines, and some people do better with levothyroxine. I've seen it go both ways. And for you, it may be the opposite. If you're currently on levo and not doing well, you also want to make sure that you're getting your doctor to measure certain things. So when it comes to assessing your thyroid, TSH is part of it. TSH is made in your pituitary gland. That stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. And so this hormone travels to your thyroid gland. I'm not a very good artist. Your thyroid gland, once stimulated by TSH, will start to produce T4. T4, if you're taking levothyroxine, it's a synthetic version of T4. It's again, synthetic. And what your body will do with this synthetic T4, because again, if you don't have a gland, if you've had your gland removed, then what happens is this T4 that you're taking orally takes the place of what the gland would have produced. But your body still has to convert T4 into T3. Now, T3 is what we call the active form of thyroid hormone. T4 doesn't really have any metabolic activity. The job of T3, ultimately, as it traverses through your bloodstream, is it goes into your cells and it talks to the cell nucleus, to the DNA inside the cell nucleus. There are little receptors that stick off, called nuclear receptors, that stick off the cell nucleus. So if this is the cell, this is the nucleus of the cell. This is what's called a retinoic acid receptor or thyroid hormone receptor. It's vitamin A dependent. And this is one of the reasons why vitamin A deficiency can cause a person to still behave as if they're low thyroid, even if they're taking the medicine. Because if this thyroid hormone can't make it and interact with this receptor because there's not enough vitamin A for that receptor to function, then you're still out of business. This receptor also requires vitamin D for its functionality. And then to convert that levothyroxine into T3, that's something that requires selenium. It also requires iron. So if you're iron anemic, iron deficient, if you're selenium deficient, this levothyroxine as T4 gets stuck at T4 and it can never go on efficiently to form the active T3, which then talks to your DNA. Once it talks to your DNA, this is what basically regulates or increases your metabolic function, your metabolism, so to speak. And this final step requires omega-3, which more than half the country is deficient in omega-3. And this is something we see quite commonly. So you talk about thyroid hormone, like if this is all new information to you, please go watch my nutritional crash course on the nutrients involved in this regulation. But if you're on this medication and not doing well, you've got to get with a doctor who can measure your selenium and your iron and your A and your D and your omega-3, because it may be that the medicine would work better if you had adequate of these nutrients. And it may be that you have adequate of these nutrients and this is just the wrong medicine for you, and that something like an Armour thyroid would work better in your situation and have better biological activity for you. So this is part of what you have to rule in and rule out if you're struggling, if you're taking thyroid medicine and struggling. And it's not hard to do. You just have to make sure that the doctor you're working with has knowledge of nutritional biochemistry as it relates to thyroid hormone function. Some endocrinologists do, most don't, in my experience. And this is part of the problem, is there's no real nutrition is taught in medical school. And you have to remember that biochemistry, nutrition is what biochemistry is the crux of human health. If nutrition's off or nutrition's depleted or you don't have adequate nutrients feeding your cells, then they're not going to work properly. And you're going to have dysfunction as a result of your cells not having what they need to work properly. I did the INA test and many of my markers were all the way to the left. Can you have too much in your cells? No. So this is not a too much test, May. This, if you're doing an INA, it's not a toxicity test. It's an outcomes test. Go back and watch, because I talked about this for like 30 minutes last week. If you go back and watch last Thursday's Q&A, I did quite a deep dive on serum testing versus INA testing and what the outcomes meant. And I think that will help you really, really understand the context of your question. I don't want to spend another 30 minutes today. We've got too many questions coming in. Let's see, come down on the center for me. Here we go. There we go. Do you know of any research that actually demonstrates that TSH reflects the condition of the thyroid? Look, TSH doesn't reflect the condition of the thyroid. TSH is made in your pituitary gland. It reflects the health of partially the health of the pituitary gland, but it doesn't reflect the health of the thyroid. So your thyroid gland itself sends a message to your pituitary gland when T4 is too low. And it says, hey, we need more T4 in the bloodstream, pituitary gland make more TSH, right? So when it's a feedback loop. So when this loop is activated because of low T4, then TSH generally gets driven up. And then the higher the level of TSH as it goes up, there's more stimulation of the thyroid gland to make more T4. So it's a feedback loop system. What doctors try to do, unfortunately, is they try to just measure this, because if your TSH is high, in the range for TSH is usually like 0.5 to 4.5 on most labs. And so if the TSH is above 4.5, let's say your TSH is 7, then a doctor's assumption based on that is that you have low thyroid. You have low thyroid hormone production because your TSH is high. That's the assumption. And many doctors, that's all they'll do. They'll just measure this. They won't measure the T4, but what should be measured? What are the labs that you should adamantly request to assess just the bare bones basics of thyroid? So TSH is one, but it's only part of the picture. Then we have T4, and we also have free T4. There's total, what we call total T4, which is bound to proteins, but then there's also free T4, and then we also have T3, and which is total, again, total and free T3. There's also something called reverse T3, which happens when you are being over-medicated. Sometimes if you're being over-medicated, those of you taking like levothyroxine, and the dose is too high, sometimes you'll find that your reverse T3 is too high. That can be an indicator that you're being over-medicated. But reverse T3 being elevated could also be an indicator of selenium deficiency. But these are just bare bones. Now, this is just the hormones themselves. But if we really want to look at thyroid hormone function, and how everything is working together, we're also going to want to look at vitamins and minerals. And so to make TSH, that's under the regulation of B12 and magnesium and zinc. So it's important to measure those in that regard. To measure T4, it's important to understand that the T in T4 is actually tyrosine, which is an amino acid that is very, very crucial to the forming of T4, and that the 4 in T4 is actually iodine. And that to put iodine and to attach it to tyrosine, that also is under the auspice of inositol, and vitamin B2 helps to get iodine into the cell itself. So without vitamin B2, you can have what's called a Syn-Porter defect. And so iodine's not being delivered properly into the thyroid cells. And this is also free T4, right? So then, from the conversion of T4 to T3, as I mentioned before, we need to measure selenium, and we also need to understand iron levels because of that conversion. And then, as I mentioned earlier, T3, the next step is that T3 talks to your cells. And as it's trying to talk to your cells, it requires vitamin A and vitamin D to do that, and also omega-3. But then it's also important to understand that to convert T4 to T3, a lot of that, what's called peripheral conversion, happens in your liver. So let's say, for example, that you have a high carbohydrate diet and you've been diagnosed with something called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Well, this is going to affect this T4 to T3 conversion. If your liver's damaged, your liver enzymes are elevated, or you like to drink alcohol and wine, or if you're just a high carbohydrate person with liver damage and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, your ability to convert T4 to T3 is going to be dramatically reduced. So if you're trying to assess a thyroid, honestly, you should be measuring and looking at all these factors, because if you're not, and that's the doctor's job, if the doctor's not doing that, they're not doing their job. But so the question is measuring TSH. Like, look how much more than just TSH is involved in assessing thyroid hormone function. And then even beyond labs, right? So those are just labs, but beyond labs, you have to also, doctors should be assessing the patient's lifestyle, the patient's stress levels, their exercise levels, their exposure to sunshine, their exposure to clean air, clean water, or not clean air, not clean water, those types of things. So you really have to, at the end of the day, you have to have all those things really well assessed if you're going to understand the body as a whole. Trying to microcosm down the different subparts of the body and only understand small aspects of it is what leads to unsatisfied patient outcomes, in my experience. Okay, dental CT scan showed a dark circle in the sinus cavity above the tooth. Any suggestions what I should have my medical doctor check or test for? I mean, if your dental CT scan showed a dark circle there, you probably, I mean, what did he tell you? Most likely you have an infection. You could have lots of things checked in your blood to confirm or non-confirm that infection, but if you don't know what kind of infection it actually is, and it's a crapshoot because there's a lot of different microorganisms that can infect a sinus cavity. You could ask for a sinus culture, and that might help. If you grow any kind of fungus or bacteria out of it, it might give you some insight. But that's probably where I would start anyway. My TSH is slightly elevated. My doc says it probably my chemistry, aka normal. I don't understand what you mean by that, but I now have full thyroid blood panel every year to curb any autoimmune disease early. It's not my thyroid. What can it be? If your TSH is slightly elevated, it could be a number of things. It could be a number of the things that I just talked about, and a number of the nutrients, the vitamins, the minerals that I just talked about. It could also be if you're supplementing with iodine, or if you're supplementing with higher amounts of biotin, which a lot of women do for hair, because biotin is a B vitamin that helps with hair. That can artificially inflate your TSH. And so on a lab test, if you're going to use a TSH and have it checked, it's important that nutritionally you should be off of your iodine and off of any biotin supplements for about a week before the test, just so you don't flag a false high on your TSH. Okay, let's see here. Just getting functional health testing back. TSH is high and low vitamin D. Any recommendations? I mean, you don't have enough information. I mean, yeah, vitamin D, you could supplement with some vitamin D depending on how low it is to correct vitamin D deficiency. If you're just using supplementation to correct it, usually takes between 8 and 10,000 units a day of cholecalciferol, vitamin D3. But there's also the question of why is it low? And if it's low because you're inflamed, and this is often the case, vitamin D most commonly, a lot of people take vitamin D supplements to get their levels up, but in reality, if they would deal with the inflammation, their vitamin D levels would normalize. Vitamin D is used up when the body's hyperinflamed. And so I would suspect anyone with low vitamin D, low 25-OHD, having an inflammatory problem. So I would investigate deeper as to what potentially might be driving an inflammatory problem in you, Angel. Premenopause started at 39, 5 years of tornado hell in the body, undiagnosed Hashis, Addison's, Ehlers-Danlos, POTS. Could the dysautonomia make the symptoms worse? The dysautonomia is a reflection of the problem. It's the dysautonomia is just a diagnostic criterial name that you're giving this cluster of problems. It's not that dysautonomia makes the symptoms worse. It's dysautonomia is the reactionary state of the body. You got to figure out why that's happening. I mean, the dysautonomia in and of itself, most cases of dysautonomia that I see are actually cases of mold toxicity or mold poisoning. If you haven't looked at mold as a potential, I would strongly suggest you do. How do you support a partial thyroid after one lobe is removed? The same way you would look at these parameters. with one lobe being removed, it's possible the body compensates, just like with the kidney. You lose one kidney, your second kidney compensates. You take away one lobe, your other lobe can compensate. But you've got to have nutrition dialed in order for that to be optimized. So I would support it by optimizing, by understanding, right? So I'd want to know those things on the board behind me. Take a screenshot of that so that you could better get to assessing what is the best way for you to support your unique situation. Because you may have 2 or 3 of those problems. You may have only 1 or 2 of those problems. You may have all of them. Just depends. Is using Redmond sea salt and water and on food as good for the body as using liquid minerals? I mean, define liquid minerals. There's different brands. There's different contents. So I mean, I would say as a general rule of thumb, humans need salt, and using salt in your food or even in your water, especially if you're using reverse osmosis drinking water, is ideal to replenish the minerals and electrolytes that are lost through the filtration. But I would say when you're putting your salt, your sea salt in your water, you are creating liquid minerals, right? So that's when you look at liquid minerals, where do most liquid mineral brands come from? Usually some derivative of sea salt or seawater, not sea salt, but seawater or salty body of water. Like a lot of products that are liquefied are actually taken, as an example, many products are taken from the Great Salt Lake. They're concentrated water electrolyte substances that you add to your water that are actually taken directly from the Great Salt Lake because of its intense and rich content. So when you're adding a salt to your water, you're just basically recreating kind of a similar thing. Doses, what doses are effective for selenium and inositol? Selenium, anywhere between 200 and 400 micrograms a day. Inositol, 500 to 1,500 milligrams a day. I would be more on the favor of 1,500 milligrams a day as a starting point. How do we get government insurance companies to see the INA? You don't. You're not going to. You fire your insurance companies and don't ever rely on the government for anything. But at the end of the day, medical insurance is a scam. I think you've all seen that with the things going on where they have upped everyone's rates, but they then deny your claims purposefully and malintentionally try to not pay the bill. And here you are, working hard to provide your family with insurance, and they're purposefully hiring tricksters to take your money but not provide the service they promised. You're not going to convince them. They actually, I think I talked about this before. This was like 20 years ago. I've done more nutritional testing arguably than anyone alive. I don't know anyone who's done more nutritional testing than I've done in my career of 25 years. And it was about 20 years ago. We were deep into lab and clinic, and we started getting insurance letters from major carriers like Blue Cross and Cigna and Aetna, because at the time we took insurance, and at the time insurance was covering these tests. But what happened was they started reviewing cases. So they when I was one of the doctors they targeted, so they called my office. We want to review these cases. You're treating your patients that we believe is not medically necessary because your peers aren't doing the same thing. And I'm like, well, which peers are you looking at? Because I'm a diplomate with the American Clinical Board of Nutrition. I've gone to school an extra 3 years to do nutrition specifically clinically, and I'm board certified in it. And my peers aren't. If you look at all my other peers, most of them aren't. We're a rare breed. The nutritional doctors of the world that are board certified was very rare. There's maybe 350 of us. That being said, they wanted to review my cases. I sent them the cases that they asked for, and then they proceeded to ask for a refund. And then I said no. And I proceeded to say that who reviewed those cases, and they told me it was a nurse. And I said, no offense to nurses, but the nurse isn't qualified to review these cases. I was an instructor to nurses. I taught nutrition in nursing schools. So I know what the qualifications are, and I know the class that they took from me, it's a long story, but the instructors at the university that I was teaching nutrition to nursing students, my boss at the school told me to water down the information, that I was too hard, that my class was too hard. I said, these are going to be nurses. There's no too hard. These are nurses that are going to treat your mother. They're going to treat your aunt. They're going to treat your family members. And if they don't know their job, then I'm not doing mine. And I'm not going to put people out in the world that aren't qualified, that are saying they're qualified. So anyway, I ended up leaving teaching because of the conflict of interest between them trying to pass people who weren't qualified into the world of nursing, and me saying, no, I'm not going to play a role in that. Anyway, long story short, coming back to the case review, I said, a nurse is not qualified to review my case. You need to put a doctor on the case. And whoever you put on the case, you need to make sure that that doctor has nutritional training that's equal to mine. Otherwise, they're not a peer, and it's not a peer review. Of course, they didn't give me a doctor that had peer credentials. And so I basically, for all intents and purposes, I ripped him to shreds on the phone. And I said, look, you're not getting a refund for these cases. We're saving you tremendous amounts of money long-term. One of your cases that you reviewed, we're saving you $120,000 a year in medical bills in the emergency room, because this patient no longer has to go get treatment for migraine headaches 3 times a year in the ER. And that's just from diet change and nutrition. And anyway, we agreed to disagree, and I left insurance at that point. And shortly after, they wrote a Blue Cross Blue Shield and Aetna and Cigna all got together. They hired a little scientific board to create a white paper, position paper on doing INA testing, lymphocyte proliferation testing. And they basically demonized it forever for all insurance companies. So when you ask me, how can we get insurance companies to cover it? You're not going to, because they have purposefully written a white paper because of the work I've done, and they've demonized it because they don't want to pay for it. They do not want to pay for things that help you get better. As a general of thumb, look at the standards of care. The insurance companies, anyway, we don't have time to get into all that today, but that's the gist of it. I just don't want to encourage any of you to go down a pipe dream of trying to get something covered that's just not going to happen. I've been in this realm for 25 years, and I know what the answer is based on my experiences. So you're better going out of pocket. I know that that is not what you want to hear, and I know it's terrible, because you should be able to get great care with your insurance. But the reality is, insurance is an overinflated, basically now subsidized by our tax dollars. It's an overinflated, subsidized by our taxpayer dollars funding machine for big pharma and hospital. And so, there is no goal to get people better in that system. The goal in that system is to manage people's illness. And there's a very big difference between managing somebody's illness, taking away their power to get healthy and be healthy, versus empowering them to be healthy through knowledge and wisdom. And the knowledge and wisdom road is harder at first, and it's a little more expensive at first, but it isn't more expensive. I mean, when we look at our outcomes in our clinic versus outcomes in mainstream care, like if you look at our rheumatological outcomes with diseases like RA and scleroderma and dermatomyositis and ankylosing spondylitis and psoriatic arthritis, which are all rheumatological arthritides, our outcomes of care are vastly superior to mainstream medicine, and the initial cost is higher than the initial visit to a rheumatologist. But if you get put on a biologic, the lifelong cost for you is millions of dollars in medicine that's ultimately probably going to give you cancer and not really necessarily improve your quality of life. So anyway, enough said about that. How do we, let's see, our vitamin A and zinc deficiency, the only deficiencies with night blindness as a symptom? Pretty much. I mean, it's classic. It's like what we call pathognomonic vitamin A deficiency and night blindness. Is TEF gluten-free? No, it is not. I can tell you one of today's visitors that has not read No Grain, No Pain because of the question, and it's not an offense to you, but I would strongly encourage you to go read No Grain, No Pain, so that you can get access to all the knowledge that you need about what is and what is not gluten-free. There's a lot of misinformation out there on this topic. What if I get heart racing from thyroid medication? but I have a TSH of 5. It still doesn't, just because your TSH is high doesn't mean that you can't be over medicated. This is why only looking at TSH is very misleading. But if you have direct heart palpitations, you know, you need to talk with your doctor about lowering your medication and see if those heart palpitations go away. If they do, it's your medication. If they don't, you may have heart palpitations for a completely different reason. But you need to rule out that difference, because if you're putting pressure on your heart by being over medicated with your thyroid medicine, that's going to spell a problem for you in your future. Have severe migraines with vomiting around my cycle, beginning end. Could it be related to Hashimoto's? Don't know where to turn because the gyno sends me to the neuro and the neurologist just prescribes pain meds. Change your diet, Carol. That's the number one place to start. Or I don't know if I'm saying your name right, Kara or Carol. Migraines are can be a direct consequence of gluten exposure. Gluten is a neurotoxin that can trigger migraine headaches and vomiting syndromes. And it can be tied to your cycle as well. The cycle with the hormone changes. Sometimes the gluten symptoms can be worse at certain parts of the cycle. But because you have Hashimoto's, I would strongly suggest you look at gluten, because I haven't seen a case in 25 years where somebody had a diagnosis of Hashimoto's that was not gluten sensitive and didn't have dramatic improvements in their health by just making diet change. So that's where I would start. No grain, no pain. I have been searching for and demanding better care for autoimmune for 17 years. I still do not know my root cause. Insurance companies do not cover functional doctors. You have said it very, very succinctly. That is many, many individuals' frustration. Lilac, have you watched my master class on autoimmune, the cure for autoimmune disease? Because I have. It's about 2 hours long, but very much worth your time. If you haven't watched it, strongly encourage you check that class out to give you better guidance. Even though it's not the same as working with a doctor, it might show you some insights that help your condition and help you. Is the Hashimoto's roller coaster common? Yes, super common, because it's mismanaged. Most doctors only look at TSH. That's the way they monitor their patients. And so it's just such an insignificant, fractionalized way to look at, at good management. And so people are lost in it, and they just trust the endocrinologist to know that they're doing the right thing. But at the end of the day, if they're only using TSH, they're shortcutting you. It's all about standard of care, folks. The insurance companies will pay for TSH monitoring. The insurance company doesn't like to pay for TSH T3, T4, free T3, free T4, reverse T3. They don't like that. It costs them more money. They would rather only pay for TSH and then let your doctor monitor you that way. And the doctors don't buck that insurance companies, because if they do, this is what happened to me. When I told them I wasn't going to just do what they wanted me to do, they put a scarlet letter, if you know the meaning, on my online profile. So like if somebody went to Blue Cross Blue Shield and they looked me up, they would see this big like stamp of evilness, saying that I was an unreasonable and super expensive doctor that would cost their insurance company more money to deter people from coming to my office. I'm like, why do I want negative publicity? I've been working a lot of years to build a great reputation for great patient care, and I'm going to let these guys tarnish my reputation because they don't want to pay the bill for something that is medically necessary, but they have a different idea of it. And you have to understand that type of insurance pressure on the doctors is very, very real. And I'm just a different breed. I don't let people control my choices. I believe that the relationship, when somebody comes to see me, that relationship is not going to be tarnished, is not going to be influenced by external forces that have no business in that relationship. And insurance companies are very much that to doctors today. They will write your doctor's letters saying, hey, why are you doing this? And why aren't you doing that? we're willing to pay for this, but we're not willing to pay for that. And you're doing it wrong. And we need you to get on board and do it the way we say you need to do it. That's not a good doctor, because if the doctor's allowing the insurance company to dictate your care for fear of losing insurance coverage, then, you know, you're probably better off without them anyway if they're that influenced. We saw that, you know, in these past 5 years. We saw so many of the doctors being influenced in that same kind of way to the detriment of many people. What can cause a high reverse T3? Probably the most common cause of high reverse T3 is selenium. It's either selenium deficiency or being over medicated by thyroid medication. So if you're on a medicine and you have a high reverse T3, it's possible that you're being over medicated, but it's possible you have a selenium deficiency. Those are pretty much the two typicals. Yeah, a lot of I think chatter in the box around cost. I get it. You know, functional care initially can be expensive. Look, those of you that haven't already tackled no grain, no pain, I mean, you've got to, if you can't afford functional care, your best next step, honestly, on a budget is follow no grain, no pain. I mean, I wrote the book. It's based on 20 plus years of successful clinical outcomes in putting autoimmune disease in remission. And if you doubt that, go look at some of our case studies. We've got them published on our YouTube channel. People with many different types of conditions and autoimmune problems getting better, going into remission, coming off their medications by following the information from that book, No Grain, No Pain. So if you want a low cost, almost if you get no cost, if you have a library card, I mean, No Grain, No Pain is in many libraries across the country. So that's a great place to start. I encourage any of you who are really, you know, budget constrained, pick a copy of the book up. I was put on a new inhaler that induces an anticholinergic, which blocks acetylcholine at its receptors. Is this really a good idea? My pulmonary doctor just blew off my questions and concerns. Find a different doctor. Look, if your doctor blows off your concerns and your questions, all you have to do, go read the pharmaceutical small print of that medication and look at the laundry list of side effects when you have anticholinergics. It's not a good thing long term. You're talking about dementia. Remember, acetylcholine is the primary neurochemical that allows brain cells to communicate. It's the primary neurochemical that allows your parasympathetic nervous system to talk to your organs and to talk to your muscles. So when you start blocking cholinergic receptors, you're blocking one of the main ways that your body communicates through the neurological system. And, you know, many of them will tell you, well, it's just in your lungs. It's an inhaler. It'll be isolated there. No, it is. It's not going to be isolated just to your lungs. It's going to go systemic. Your lungs have access to your bloodstream, and the medicine's going to go systemic. So is it a good idea? That's between you and your doctor. But really, the bigger question is, if your doctor's blowing you off, maybe you should make it between you and a different doctor who won't blow you off, who will give you some better ideas as to what you can do. But if you're taking an inhaler to support asthma symptoms, you have to understand that asthma has causes. Asthma is an inflammatory airway disease. So what is driving the inflammation? Wheat is a major trigger of asthma. One of the earliest known versions of asthma is something called baker's asthma. Why baker's asthma? Because the big fat bakers wearing the white aprons were throwing up wheat flour in their kitchens, and they were exposed to it, and they were inhaling that wheat flour in, and it was doing what? It was causing airway inflammation. So can wheat in your diet cause airway inflammation? Of course it can. You should be looking down that route as a primary dietary starting point. But if you've got a doctor that is blowing you off, it's time to find somebody who won't. I like this comment. All I know is no grain or dairy or any of the American, no asthma, no drugs, no doctors, no clinic, no doc bills, truth in all he speaks. but you have to do it. I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. Thank you for your testimonial comment, Terry. A lot of people get stuck in the world of, should I change my diet? Well, I don't want to, or they get stuck in the whole, I don't want to change my diet. It's like the truth, they don't want to know, they want to know the truth, but they don't want to know the truth, because if they learn the truth, it means they got to take action. And so once they know it, it like condemns them to have to change their diet in a way that maybe is less convenient or maybe is harder for them to do. It's a pickle. I understand it. We all put blockades up to our personal progress, whether it's health or whether it's other things. We all have the tendency to want to do that, to want to hide from the truth as long as possible until the pain becomes so great we can no longer hide from it. And only thing I can do to encourage any of you is to say, don't wait. The quicker you take action, the quicker you'll have an answer. And if the diet doesn't help you, okay, come back and tell me how wrong I was and how much you can eat all those other foods. But if the diet helps you, you win. And it didn't cost you anything other than your time in watching this video. Well, let's see here. Hi, Dr. O. What could possibly cause phosphorus deficiency? Steroid medications. It's not the most common deficiency, but it can be problematic. But steroid medications are a common driver for that. Let's see here. Let's go down. There we go. Last week at Doc's office, big poster of adequate vitamin D, 600 IUs per day. Then I had to fight over it to get a vitamin D test. He doesn't do it before you're 75 years old, but I got it done. Good for you. So, advocate for yourself. 600 IUs a day is like spitting on a forest fire for those of you trying to correct vitamin D. You're not going to get any correction below 6,000 units a day. If you're inflamed, 10,000 units a day is where you need to be as a general thumb. And the only exception to that rule would be if you have been diagnosed with sarcoidosis and your kidneys can't properly regulate calcium. And that in that situation, that could create a hypercalcemia, which you don't want. It can cause heart disruption. So if you've got sarcoidosis, don't do that. But if you have healthy kidney function and vitamin D is low, 6 to 10,000 units a day is very safe. Just recheck it periodically to make sure you're not overdoing it. If patients have celiac, possible is thyroid work good? I think what you're maybe, I don't know what you're asking there, but I'm going to assume if somebody has celiac disease, is it possible for them to also have thyroid disease? And the answer is yes. One of the most common corollary diseases to celiac disease is actually Hashimoto's. If you look at statistically people with celiac disease, much higher rates of Hashimoto's, also much higher rates of rheumatoid arthritis, much higher rates of Sjogren's, much higher rates of lupus. And this is because celiac is at its core is autoimmune, gluten-induced autoimmune, but many of these other autoimmune diseases also at their core are gluten-induced autoimmunities. That's why no grain, no pain. That's why you start there first, because it's the diet change that can make the biggest impact for people out of the gates at the lowest cost. That's why I wrote the book. People complain about how expensive functional medicine is, but go read the book. There's 20 years of knowledge and experience in that book. For if you buy it on Amazon, it's like $9, and if you have an Audible account and you sign up for an Audible account, it's free. You can get a free download, so it doesn't even have to cost you anything. Is there any code for the gluten sensitivity test? No, just for the vitamin and mineral deficiency test right now. So pre-20, if you want to save on the vitamin and mineral deficiency test, but there is currently no code on the gluten sensitivity test. Can stopping gluten cause constipation? Depends. For some people, it's not that the stopping of gluten, it's that you've abruptly changed the amount of fiber that you're consuming in your diet by cutting out grain. And so if you're not replacing that potentially with other forms or sources of fiber, then constipation can be a side effect, Johnny. So you have to look at, when you change your diet, that you're incorporating other foods that, might continue to help support healthy bowel movements. In the UK, they are starting to add mandatory folic acid to wheat and commercially produced bread. They already do that in the US. They've been doing that for years. And folic acid is a synthetic form of folate, which is not good for humans. It's actually, there's studies showing it increases the risk for cancer, because your body you can't process folic acid very easily, especially if you have an MTHFR mutation. And folic acid is like a nightmare for that person's body to process. Are fermented foods good for the gut? It can be. Depends on what kind of fermented foods you're talking about. A lot of fermented foods, it's how they're fermented. I mean, one of the problems with fermentation is the sugar that's left over. If you're doing saltwater ferments like sauerkraut or vegetables like cabbage or cauliflower, not a big deal because there's no sugar involved. But if you're doing ferments of dairy where you have added sugar, if you're doing like kombucha ferments, there's a lot of times there's still sugar left over in those products, and it's the sugar you don't necessarily want. But there can also be alcohol in those products, a lot of those kombucha drinks especially. So part of it we can't just blanket statement all fermentations are fantastic for everyone. But fermented foods can be a healthy way to preserve food, one, and two, a great way to get good microbial species in the gut that help you with digestion and help your gut function appropriately. Are there other known causes for phospholipid antibodies besides gluten? Gluten and other foods. You could have sensitivities to other foods even beyond gluten. You could have a microbial problem. So there are different bacteria, gram-negative bacteria, that we know can trigger an increased risk for the development of those antibodies. There are chemical exposures that can occur that can increase the risk of those antibodies. And then there are nutritional deficits that in certain nutrients regulate the behavior of your immune cells. And so certain deficiencies can lead to or trend toward autoimmune reactions. So this is, it doesn't matter what your diagnosis is. If you have an autoimmune condition, food, chemicals, microbes, and nutritional deficiencies are the categorical triggers that you should prioritize working with a doctor to get measured, so that you have a blueprint on how to change your diet and lifestyle and navigate autoimmunity. Are there plans for nutritional tests for European customers? Yes, there are. We're working that out right now, and we've actually had some nice preliminary early tests of success with that, so be patient with us, Lois. Could the elevated reverse T3 be due to resistance? I felt that the T3 wasn't getting into cells. No, it's not due to resistance. It's reverse T3 is a mechanism. It's a braking mechanism of hyper T3, or rather, not of hyper T4 more than anything else. Your body has too much T4. It'll shift toward reverse T3 metabolically. My TSH came down from 5 to 9. My TSH came to 5 from 9, came down, okay, with tyrosine, selenium, and iodine, and ashwagandha supplements for 1 month. Do I need to continue supplements for longer? You can. There's no harm in it. If you got great improvement in a downward trend just from those few things, you might consider another month and remeasuring it. Can spirulina 450 plus iron bisglycinate daily be beneficial for a hypothyroid person who's iron deficient? Yes, but it's not enough iron. If you're iron deficient, 9 milligrams a day is not enough. I mean, you've got to get much higher amounts than that. Is there truth in thyroid malfunction not showing up in blood work, even though my T3, T4? Yeah, a lot of doctors will tell you that, well, it's one of my least favorite things that I see doctors doing, is that they treat you for low thyroid even if your thyroid numbers look normal in your blood. And if you're having your TSH, T3, T4, free T3 and T4, and reverse T3 all measured, and they're all normal, The likelihood that you need more thyroid hormone is very, very slim to none. But some doctors treat your symptoms with the medicine instead of monitoring your blood. I mean, to me, if you're going to use objective testing, you should honor the values in the objective testing to make the decision as to whether or not medication is necessary. But not all doctors do that. We've seen a lot of doctors say, well, you have to treat the patient, not their blood work. Well, okay, I agree. You do treat the patient and not necessarily only look at their blood work. But if their blood work is normal and you're giving them thyroid hormone, then the risk that you're running is you're going to put too much pressure on their heart. You're going to induce bone and muscle loss and other metabolic problems because it's not what their problem is. If you're just giving them more thyroid hormone to correct fatigue, that's not the answer. There's a lot of reasons a person can have fatigue. But anyway, a lot of doctors will treat fatigue with thyroid medication despite normal lab results. I don't know if that was your question, Ruby, but hopefully that gave you better context and an answer you were looking for. Severe cracked lips. Nutritionally, what can cause those? Three big things. Number one would be iron deficiency. Number two would be vitamin B2 deficiency. And then number three would be omega-3 fatty acid deficiency. And number four, you could put dehydration on that list. And then number five, you could put really, really cold, dry climate if you're not used to that. So those are all things that could potentially cause a severe cracking of the lips. But if it's regular climate and you just always have chapped and cracked lips, I would look at iron and vitamin B2 first. Those are really the top two that we see clinically. I fought going totally grain-free, but then God popped your video on healing AI disease in front of me, and you explained why I need to drop the grains. Very thankful for the explanation. I'm glad you found it. I'm glad God put that in front of you. I have Hashimoto's and fibroid on my uterus. Are they related? Yeah, they can be. I mean, uterine fibroids are very commonly caused by iodine deficiency, and iodine is sometimes necessary, a necessary tool to help people with Hashimoto's recover. So that would be one area that you could get investigated. So measuring your iron or your iodine levels would be a good place to start. What food, I'm not sure I understand your question. What food take Hashimoto's patient? What foods can you eat? Start with no grain, no pain. Just follow the book. Follow the book and come back in a month and chime in and let us know how you're doing. I mean, you can come back next week too, but stay on the diet for at least a month. The plan in the book is 30 days. You can stay on it longer than that. Start. For how long? Johnny says, just got no grain, no pain on Audible. I imagine you mean that just now. I'm glad we have it. It's an audio, so those of you that don't like to read and want to listen, Audible. For how long is it safe to take digestive enzymes? Indefinitely. I have a really good interview with Dr. Who was that? Dr. Thank you, Dr. Bastidas. On enzymes, we did a whole crash course, and that was one of the common questions that was asked in that Q&A. But we'll put that link up for you if you want to learn more about enzymes and enzyme therapy. Very, very safe. 84-year-old mom has geographic tongue. B vitamins. If you're talking about geographic tongue, B vitamins, start there. Most common cause of geographic tongue. That and microbial imbalance in the gut. Prolactin is high. Prolactin high, UZ, because ovary or thyroid in girls. I don't know what you're asking, but if you have hyperprolactinemia, if your prolactin levels are high, the number one thing you should look at doing is going no grain. We see this all the time, where we see it in young girls, we see it in middle-aged women, but hyperprolactinemia is a very common consequence of gluten. And it's because gluten is a hormone disruptor, and it can cause your prolactin levels to elevate. Could hyperthyroidism cause my permanent, persistent atrial fibrillation? Yes, it can, Mark. So no grain, no pain, get the diet dialed in. You might find that that starts to subside. Wouldn't surprise me. I mean, you have other medical options to treat the hyperthyroidism. If you didn't watch Tuesday's interview, go watch it, because we talked about how Dr. Ozansky cured his hyperthyroidism. And one of the things he did with some of those symptoms initially was he took bugleweed and some other herbs to symptomatically help while he was changing his diet and doing other things more long-term for the correction of his hyperthyroidism. For the past 10 years, I'm taking half dose of antihistamine with an inhaler. Where am I heading to? You're heading to dementia. Because antihistamine's long-term use will suppress the brain function and will also cause low acid production in your stomach, causing malabsorption and malnutrition. And there's linkage now with antihistamines to dementia. Depending on the type of inhaler you're taking, if it's a steroid inhaler, that's bad news long-term. Other kinds of inhalers aren't great either. You got to get your diet changed. If you're struggling that bad with allergies, I mean, it's either your diet or your environment. So your diet needs to change first. That's the low-hanging fruit of free. It doesn't cost you anything to change your diet other than educating yourself. And then if that's not working, then you have to start looking at environmental triggers, other causes. What do you use for cold sores? There's two options. One would be, we have a product called Virid, V-I-R-I-D. And the active ingredients in Virid are several. There's vitamin C and zinc and vitamin A. There's also lysine. And so that combination of ingredients is very, very effective in this type of scenario. Now, the other thing you can do is you can take independently lysine and vitamin C at higher doses together. And we have a lysine amino acid product that you can look at Gluten-Free Society. We also have several independent vitamin C products that you can look at. But if you want a kind of a one-shot all, it's Virid, V-I-R-I-D. And I'll put a link up for you. What's the optimal ferritin level? For a woman in her menstruating years, optimal ferritin is above 70, between 70 and 150 typically. If it's below 70 and you're menstruating, you're probably going to be doing this in and out of anemia every month, where you have what we call transient iron deficiency caused by your cycle. And so you'll spend 2 to 3 weeks out of your month in anemia or recovering from the anemia. Ferritin is your stored iron, right? So it's what your liver kind of stores back. When you do have that cycle, your liver can pump out iron to replenish you. I have a big thyroid nodule and a low TSH, but normal T3, T4. What could be done? You got to get nutritional testing, Sarah, because thyroid nodules, a lot of times when your numbers are normal, it could be nutritional, and iodine might be playing a role there. Now, I would also suggest that if you're, I don't know how low your TSH is, but if your TSH is like 0.0 something, I would get TSI antibody testing done, even though your T3 and T4 are normal. TSI stands for thyroid stimulating immunoglobulin, and it's a test that kind of measures the antibodies that are produced in people that have Graves' disease. So those are the two things I'd recommend. Does the INA test show threonine? Yes, it does. Not theanine, but threonine. What can be the reason one can't tolerate any supplements? The number one reason we see people having supplement intolerance is their body burden of toxins is greater. And so when they take supplements, it accelerates detoxification pathways. And so all that stuff starts spilling out of them, and it creates a problem. One of the more common toxic overloads we see in supplement intolerance is people who have mold issues, so environmental mold. And if you want to learn more about mold, check out all my information. We have a whole project going on right now about mold. We're in the middle of a documentary film, but go to moldjacked.com. And you can go over there. We also have a quiz on that website. So if you, if you have changed your diet already, maybe you're already following no grain, no pain, you're still struggling, take that mold quiz. And it'll give you kind of some insight as to whether or not mold may be a culprit in your world. Can a blood sample travel okay to the US if it's within the 72-hour window? Yes, it absolutely can. Provided you don't have a customs hang up. So you just have to make sure that generally it's not a problem coming from there to here, overseas to US, not for us anyway in the clinic. Let's see here. I went no grain, sugar, or alcohol 2 years ago to see if it would help my asthma, but not working. Any suggestions? What about microscopic colitis? You got to get deeper testing done. If you are grain and sugar and alcohol free, that's a great place to start. But if your asthma is still present and you have microscopic colitis, honestly, I would look at mold, because mold in the environment can irritate the airway, creating and triggering asthma. But there's now data, a lot of data, and we've seen this clinically, where mold mycotoxins are causing disruption of the microbiome. Because what are mycotoxins? They're antibiotics. It's what penicillin is. It's made from molds. It's a toxin produced by mold. And that's why they're so effective at neutralizing bacterial infections. But when you're breathing in mold toxins on a daily basis, you're decimating your flora, and that can lead to inflammatory bowel disease. But also you're breathing it in, and it can inflame your GI or your lungs, contributing to airway inflammation. Multivitamins for teenagers, ultra nutrients. Carla, that's probably our best option for teenagers. Depending on, on their size. If they're over 100 pounds, then 2 capsules twice a day. So like 2 with breakfast, 2 with lunch, or 2 with lunch, 2 with dinner, or 2 with breakfast, 2 with dinner. But just split that dosing up. How much iodine should one take? Depends. If your TSH is 0.22, I mean, I can't really tell you how much you should take without actually understanding more about you. But, as a general rule of thumb, we have a product called Ultra Thyroid Support. And it has a small amount of iodine from kelp, among many other nutrients that are necessary for your thyroid to properly function. So it's a thyroid support formula. So if you're looking at, like, if you want to do higher doses of iodine, like we sometimes go, anywhere from 12 to 25 milligrams a day of iodine, but that's not something I would recommend somebody without testing do, because there are complications with iodine. It's one of the few nutrients that can create some symptoms that can be hard to interpret if you don't know enough about it. And so if you're flying at it alone without a doctor, don't recommend that. But if you're using that ultra thyroid support, it's a good product that will give you a good baseline of iodine as a general support for your thyroid. If a workplace has many rats in and around the office, been there for 3 years, now struggling with toenail fungus, is there any correlation? I mean, I don't know. Why are the rats in your workplace? Is there a sewage problem? Is there a trash or a garbage issue within the workplace? I would say, yeah, it could be very much a problem if you've got leaking sewage gas that's attracting, animals, or if you've got rotten food somewhere that's not being properly handled or cleaned, that's attracting, pests. But, aside from rats being able to carry disease, they leave behind feces and dander and all other sorts of nefarious compounds that you could inhale or ingest. So, I mean, there could be a correlation, but I mean, this is just me speculating out loud without any other data. How quickly would you expect results taking selenium and inositol? I mean, from a perspective of lowering antibodies, 2 to 3 months. I wouldn't check any sooner than that, but oftentimes even 6 months. And the question, is it needed to continue forever? Time tells. Time gives you that answer. In my experience, no. But I wouldn't just take selenium and inositol either, just to lower my antibodies. I would also be wanting to ask bigger questions like, are there other potential reasons why my antibodies are elevated, i.e. diet, food sensitivities, i.e., microbials, i.e., other nutrient deficiencies beyond selenium and inositol that could be, contributory. So it's one of those things that it's a short-term aid while you go on the real long-term hunt for the real reason. Would it be best to talk to one's endocrinologist about taking ultrathyroid support? It's always a good idea to talk to your doctor if you have a good relationship with them and you have good trust with them. But you have to also keep this in mind. It depends on their level of education. Medical doctors aren't trained in nutrition, even though legally they are authorized legally to talk about nutrition. They aren't trained in it, and so it's an unfortunate disconnect, and a lot of people don't get that. So who's the best person to talk to nutrition about? The person that's been trained in it or the person that hasn't been? Well, this is why your question has multiple answers, because if your endocrinologist has a nutritional background and has gone and done extra postgraduate work in nutritional training and has really dialed it in, then absolutely your endocrinologist is a great person to talk to about it. But if your endocrinologist hasn't stepped foot in New York that just crossed the border and submit their blood draw across the border and send it in that way from a different state, from a bordering state. That I off the top of my head. Are we out? Are we out?
Yeah, your sound went out for a second, but you're back now.
We're back. Okay. Is it a well-known and safe method to use radioactive iodine to reduce thyroid nodules? Look, if I had nodules in my thyroid, there's no way in hell I would use radioactive iodine to decimate my thyroid. Damaging your organ doesn't fix it. Removing your organ doesn't fix it. That's my opinion of it. Now, everybody has to make a decision. I know a lot of doctors would disagree with that statement I just made. That's fine. But I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you what I wouldn't do, and I would never radioactively bombard my thyroid. Is theanine different than threonine? Yes. Threonine is an amino acid required by humans. Theanine is an amino acid found in green teas and fungus, mushrooms, that binds to glutamate and GABA-like receptors in the nervous system that create calming effects. So threonine is very different. Its role in humans is very critical in that it helps with production of proteins and DNA and RNA synthesis, among other things. So they sound the same, but they're very different. Kind of like gluten sounds similar to glucose, very different substances. Supplements versus food. Always food first. You should always look to food first. But there are situations and conditions where nutritional deficiency has been so severe for so long that supplements can be very, very critical part of that person's recovery. But I always encourage, anytime somebody has deficiency, you need to eat the foods you're deficient in, for sure, no doubt about it. That being said, part of it depends on how low a person's levels are, how bad a person's levels are, or what the person's situation clinically is. Like, I'm not going to tell a person to correct a magnesium deficiency that's severe and they're having heart palpitations and severe muscle cramps and severe anxiety by eating food. I'm going to get therapeutic doses of magnesium in that person as quickly as I possibly can to help those symptoms subside as quickly as possible. And yes, the long-term strategy is definitely going to be food as well. But one of the things that you have to consider with food, what we think we know about food is very misleading in the way of nutritional density. So like you can look at thousands of different research studies where they're analyzing nutritional content of food, and some studies are very different than others, right? So you might have, for example, broccoli grown in this part of the world and broccoli grown in that part of the world might have very, very different nutrient levels depending on their soil, depending on if that food was shipped from one location to another location, how long was it in transit, did they spray it with different chemicals? So there's a ton of things that can interfere or create variability in the nutritional content of food. Supplements are, well, at least the ones I use, the products that I use, if it says it has 100 milligrams in it, it has 100 milligrams in it, period. There's no question mark in my mind. Now, if that food is supposed to have 100 milligrams of magnesium in it per serving size, and maybe it only has 50, I can't control for that, right? So as a doctor trying to get a therapeutic level in, I can't rely on food the way I might sometimes rely on supplementation as structuring a dose regimen for somebody trying to overcome a deficiency. So that's one of the other scenarios. But yes, food first, always food. Food should always be part of your plan. Those of you who are seeking to find health through supplements alone without diet change, that's a pipe dream. You're not going to accomplish it. Does keeping Hashimoto's antibodies low guarantee you won't get another autoimmune condition? No. There's no guarantees in anything. There's no guarantees in life. You could have, let's say you have 3 or 4 triggers for your Hashimoto's that you dealt with and addressed, and you moved on and your antibodies are normalized, but then you were doing some other things over here that weren't so healthy for you, and that led to the progression of a different kind of autoimmune disease. It's very much a possibility. The average person with one autoimmune disease will develop 7 in their lifetime. Now, that's if they don't address their triggers. Now, you can address your triggers, and if you address your triggers, you dramatically reduce the risk of developing future autoimmune condition, but that won't guarantee it. Could I book a meeting with you to receive advice and information? Yes. But would you put our contact info up for Sarah? How celiac patient, which dose suits for iron through, I think there's maybe a language barrier here, but if you're trying to get in iron as a celiac to recover from iron deficiency, you should get a therapeutic amount prescribed by your doctor. If you're using like one of my products, like Ultra Iron, I would recommend the starting place would be at 3 of those capsules per day as a starting point. And make sure if you're using iron, you take it with food. Iron can cause nausea on an empty stomach. I saw a friend use iodine topical for a boil and it worked like a charm. Yeah, iodine is, a lot of boils are infectious, right? So they're bacterial growths or bacterially induced growths. Iodine is a very, very powerful antibacterial. We used to use, I don't know if when you were a kid, maybe this is going to reveal my age more, but we called it monkey blood. And you painted it. It was iodine, and you painted it, and it turned your skin purple. And that was what we used as an antiseptic growing up. If you got a cut or a scrape, it's actually what we used to milk our cows. We use an iodine dip to reduce the potential for bacteria or other microorganism issues within the milk itself. But iodine is good stuff. It's unfortunately it's many people have low levels of iodine because of because of water fluoridation and water chlorination and water bromination and flour bromination and all these halides, what are called halides, bromine, chlorine, fluoride, deplete iodine. They push iodine out of your tissue. And so many people are walking around iodine deficient. This is one of the top reasons women develop fibrocystic breast symptoms. It's iodine deficiency. You need iodine to make progesterone. You need iodine for your pancreas to work. You need it for your thyroid to work. Super important. What are your thoughts on orthomolecular medicine? I think orthomolecular medicine is a much better term than functional medicine. I'm actually an orthomolecular practitioner. I'm listed as one. I've trained orthomolecularly. Why? Orthomolecular is a term coined by Linus Pauling. It means right molecule, meaning that if you find the right molecule, then you can cure the human disease or the human problem. So it's the general simplistic explanation of orthomolecular. But orthomolecular medicine is just another way of saying nutritional biochemical medicine. Functional medicine is a more popular term today, but orthomolecular is some of those doctors, those early on doctors like Linus Pauling and Albert Szent-Györgyi and Abram Hoffer. I mean, these were brilliant men that provided invaluable information for doctors like myself to come up the pipeline and really learn from their brilliance and then spread their message and even more. But I love orthomolecular medicine. Best way to lose weight after beginning iodine and Synthroid. There's not a best way to lose weight. You might watch we have a master class on muscle and weight loss, but the strategy behind weight loss is very, very simple. Eat well, don't eat more than your body needs, exercise aggressively to your body's tolerance, and don't do things that drive inflammation, because as you drive inflammation, you drive cortisol, you cause muscle loss, you cause water retention, and you'll never lose the weight that you're after as long as your body's inflamed. So the key to weight loss is dealing with inflammatory aspects of your diet and your lifestyle, combined with good management of your food intake and good management of your energy output. And if you do those two things, weight loss is a natural consequence. Do you recommend an autistic toddler take iodine? I recommend an autistic toddler be tested appropriately. I mean, is iodine an okay thing to take? It depends on the dose. Reasonable doses are fine, but I don't recommend just mega dosing an autistic toddler. Can you recommend anything for food poisoning? Been with not being able to even drink water since Saturday. Yeah, take a strong what we like to use for people is just flushing their bowels. You can do vitamin C flush. First of all, vitamin C is very potent to the immune system to help fight that food poisoning. And then two would be strong high dose probiotic. We have Detox C powder, Carolina, and do a flush. And then ultrabiotic defense is what we would use for a couple of weeks. And typically, at least what we see in our practice, that calms things down. If it's not, you need to get that checked out and looked at. Is there a balance of how much selenium and zinc one should take? Can nodules form if you get too much fluoride? How fast can a nodule grow? There's a lot of questions there. There's not a balance between selenium and zinc necessarily. Like if you're taking X amount of selenium, you should take X amount of zinc. No, there's not like a formal balance. Can nodules form if you get too much fluoride? If that fluoride is pushing out your iodine, yes, nodules can form. How fast can a nodule grow? It depends on the person. There's not an exact answer. I wish I could be more exacting for you, Sarah. Could an anticholinergic cause tingling, pain in my feet? Yes. Which one of your tests do you recommend first for a toddler? It depends. I mean, ideally, it depends on what their problem is, but a great place to start is always with diet change. And it's my experience that if you're looking to change the diet of a toddler, against the ideology, the false ideologies and dogmatic beliefs of pediatricians and society, probably the best test will be gluten sensitivity genetic testing, because that's the biggest ask. And the pediatricians will rebel against you, and other family members will rebel against you. But if you have the proof that it's something that that baby, that toddler needs to do to be healthy, then that's a great place to start. It's also a good time to do it because as a toddler, if they don't already have a wonderful memory of eating all these, processed cakes and baked goods and other things that contain gluten, then you're not really taking anything away from them. So there's not a loss. And a lot of times when an adult goes gluten-free, there's we call a food mourning phase, where not mourning as in AM, but mourning as in the death of loss, right? So, or the loss of, and so that can depress people. It can make them sad. I mean, even if you go today and you look at some of these celiac forums, a lot of these people are just in self-pity mode 30 years into their gluten-free diet. They're still sad. And I get it. Some people just have, love of food, and I'm okay with that. It's if you can get them when they're toddlers and they don't have all that, then you're not taking that away from them later in their life. So that would be probably where I would prioritize. And then beyond that, I would say, if they're healthy and doing really well, I might do nutritional testing just to make sure that you have the knowledge as they're growing of what nutrients you could incorporate more of into the food that they are eating, so that you're not, because it's impossible to predict the future. The best way to predict the growth and the health of a person, period, toddler or adult, is to know nutritional status, so that you can be preemptive at getting the nutrients the body needs to support all of their functions. So that would put that test in the number 2 position. I miss pizza and pancakes. Yeah, I mean, everybody misses something. Honestly, I don't miss any of it, really. I think we dwell a lot on what we miss. But you know what I really love about being in the diet realm that I'm in is how good I feel at my age and how functional I am. Like what I would miss, I think, more than anything else, was the inability to be physically active and fit and energetic. Like those things I would mourn far more than, donuts or pizza or pancakes or any other type of food. My credo in my mind is, no food tastes as good as it feels to be healthy. And I think people miss health for the cost of food in our society on a regular basis. And it's not just missing health. It's not like even that simple. It's like they welcome disease that's debilitating at the cost of food. And then everyone around them pays the price, right? So you think, unless you're living alone, in your own apartment, nobody else, you have no dependents, you don't have a spouse, and there's nobody kind of like having to be concerned about you and your poor health, and go for it, eat yourself into a coma of death. But if you're a human and you're unhealthy and you're eating yourself into illness, know that what you're really also doing is you're eating other people's lives into tumultuous strife. The worst stress I've ever seen in my clinical practice of 25 years is the stress that loved ones put on people in caretaker positions. And if you've ever been a caretaker, you'll relate really, really well to this. I've been a caretaker. I know exactly what it feels like. But it's, as a caretaker to another human adult, you don't have the power to tell them what they can or can't do, but you are forced and thrust into a position where you have to take care of them for the consequences of their bad actions. And that is a very frustrating place to be, because you're trying to still love this person that you care deeply about, but you're watching them destroy themselves. How do you balance that out in your head? So to me, if I'm talking about what I miss, it's like, I don't miss caretaking. I can tell you that. And I never want to put that burden of my failing health onto somebody else. It would be bad enough if just the unknown happened and somebody had to take care of me for reasons beyond diet, reasons beyond lifestyle, like a car accident trauma that paralyzed God forbid that ever happened. But you understand what I'm trying to say. It's that do your best to take care of you. And if that means diet change, it's not hard. It's just you've got to welcome it into your heart as the right thing to do. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle initially. So going back to that question of what test to do first, measure for your ability to do diet change first, because within that knowledge, you lose the excuse to cheat on your diet. And when the outcome of your health expands exponentially in a good way, you never really truly want to go back, and nor are you tempted to cheat. And there will always be people that yo-yo kind of back and forth. I went gluten-free for 2 months and then I came back. Usually, who are those people? Those are people that don't have a definitive as to whether or not going gluten-free is the right move for them to make. And so they're just kind of doing it as they've learned a little bit on the internet or by watching shows like this, but they've never really committed fully to it for a long period of time to really reap the benefit. And that's, to me, just a terrible place for a person to be stuck in. Okay, it feels like lunchtime. So I'm going to go eat lunch. I appreciate you guys tuning in today. Next week, we'll have a show Tuesday night, like usual. Thursday, Thanksgiving here in the U.S. we'll be celebrating, so I won't be here next week for a Thursday Q&A, but we'll be running a special show for you. So if you're into education today, we'll be playing a show for you to tune into, so check that out. And again, if you missed the earlier announcement, if you're looking to get your nutritional levels tested and you want to do that, this is our biggest, most deep discounted sale of the year on INA testing. It's the lowest I can go. We kind of lose money at this point, but we make it available nonetheless. And that's PRE20, PRE20. The link should be below for the INA. So those of you who want to get your nutrition checked, just use that promo code PRE20. For those of you who are just looking to support your thyroid nutritionally, you can check out Ultra Thyroid Support. We'll put a link up to that as well. And that's on sale right now. There's no code needed. You can, if you buy it, it's just discounted right now. So those of you who are just looking for nutritional support around your thyroid, it's a great full spectrum product to try. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked what you saw today, subscribe, hit that like button, share this video with somebody who you feel like would benefit from it. Our mission is to save 100 million lives, and we can't do that without you spreading this information, creating a ripple effect across the world to help more people. Thanks so much for being a part of my mission here at Gluten-Free Society and Dr. Osborne. I hope you have a fantastic weekend.